This conference will now be recorded.
Adam, I just made you a presenter, so when you do your presentation, you can just do it right from your screen if you want to do that. This is Richard.
This is Richard.
Yeah, hi, Richard. It's been a long time. Good to see you. So yeah, I see that it's popped up on my screen, so I can just hit share, and then it should be I should be able to see my presentation. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll hope that all works out.
People are going to get small. Keep
So
going the way we are.
Andy, do you want me to make you a presenter too, or do you want me to pull it on?
It'd probably be easier if I was presenting.
Okay. There you are. I think that still kept everybody the same. You are presenter,
So,
and
Richard,
I turned Adam off, so I will turn Adam back on, and when we get to you, Andy, we'll turn you on. So I didn't think you could do two, so we'll turn you back on. Yep, that works, Adam.
So you can see the full presentation.
Yeah.
And not all of you on the side window.
On mine, they're on the top right now, but if yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, you just give us a signal when you're ready for us to do our thing, okay?
Okie doke.
Okay, I got 7 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Roberts,
Here.
Counselor Stinnett,
Here.
Youth Representative, Counselor Fleck,
Here.
Counselor Soulsby,
Here.
Counselor Urban,
Here.
Mayor Dowling.
Here. Can we go back to the other screen before we move on so I can see everybody better?
So, Adam, if you can turn your presentation off for now, and then we'll. There we go. Oh, almost. You got to unshare. There we go. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, there's no items to be added to the agenda. So we move on to item 4, appearance of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. This is a time for citizens to comment on items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council's discussion on that item. Council will not engage in any discussion or make any decisions based on public comments at this time. However, the council may take the comments under advisement for discussion and action at a further council meeting. Does anybody wish to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5, public hearings. This evening, we have a public hearing on ordinance amending Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 1-4 Development Code Surface Water Management, which includes erosion prevention provisions. The city council will make a final decision upon the ordinance based upon complete record, including planning commission recommendation and testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings are being held virtually and will be recorded. For anyone wishing to speak, if you are accessing the meeting using video, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. If you're accessing the meeting using only audio, please announce that you would like to speak. When called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the chair, must state your name and address for the public record. We ask each speaker limit themselves to no more than 3 minutes. Please remember that all presentations will be timed. You will be informed when your allotted time is expired. All speakers exceeding this time limit will be asked by the chair to immediately conclude his or her remarks. If you do not finish your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to staff. Written testimony may also be offered and will be considered and made part of the record. In order to minimize repetitive testimony, organizations that are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group. Each person may testify only once unless called upon at the request of the council members to respond to a question. Thank you for your cooperation. Before we begin, does any councilor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? Seeing none. Ms. Ferguson, do you want to speak before I open this? Okay.
Certainly. Greetings. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive comments on the proposed amendment of the City of Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 14 Development Code to adopt Chapter 14.35 Surface Water Management, specifically erosion prevention regulations, which include amending sections 14.13 definitions, section 14.41 200A, the type 1 procedures ministerial types of approvals table, and tables 14.41.100, which is the summary of approvals by type of application type, and table 14.41.110, which is the summary of approval by type of review procedures. These are all corresponding to the erosion prevention regulations. Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 18th and recommended approval to Council. Council held a public hearing on December 14th of 2020 on this ordinance. Following discussion on the first vote of the ordinance, Council directed staff to review and revise the applicability sections of the code. Staff reviewed the revised version of the ordinance with Council at their January 11th, 2020 meeting. It is now appropriate that Council hold a public hearing on the revised ordinance. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending adoption.
Yeah, we'll now open the hearing. Does any councilors have questions for staff? Seeing none, we wish to hear from everyone who is interested in this proposal. Please remember to state your name and address for the record. Does anybody wish to give testimony? Seeing none, we will now close the hearing. Okay, so we have item B, public hearing declaring surplus real property maps and tax lot 20-03-273201-800. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the January 25th, 2021 regular meeting of the City Council, they declared a portion of map and tax lot 20-03-27-32, tax lot 1800 as public right-of-way for the developed portion of Gateway Boulevard. The city came into ownership of the parcel and tax lot 1800 in 2011 when it was conveyed via quitclaim deed by Lane County for the sum of $30. The remaining area of the parcel that wasn't dedicated as public right-of-way is approximately 7,114 square feet and is not developed. the parcel does not contain city infrastructure, i.e. water, sewer, storm, or storm. The adjoining property owner to the east, south, and west, Double H Investment Group LLC, has made an offer to purchase the undeveloped remaining portion of the tax lot 1800 for $1,000 and the cost of the professional surveying services. Double H Investment Group LLC desires tax lot 1800 for the development of the 40-unit multifamily development, which requires the additional 7,114 square feet of lot 1800. In consideration of staff's findings on the history of the real property, the lack of underground city infrastructure, and the need for the area by Double H Investment Group LLC, staff recommends holding the public hearing to consider declaring the parcel surplus. Notice of the public hearing was advertised in the Cottage Grove Sentinel on Thursday, February 4th, 2021, and the recommendation is for council to hold the public hearing.
Okay, at this time I'd open the hearing. Anyone wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Moves us to item 6, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Brings us to item 7, item A, second vote for ordinance amending Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 14 Development Code Housing Code Amendments. Ms. Ferguson.
So the item before you is related to Ordinance 3136. Council held a first vote on Ordinance 3136 at your January 25th, 2021 council meeting. The ordinance as amended is now before you for a second vote. The amendments replaced detached cottage with detached in Section 6 and replaced Section 9 with the alternative Section 9 that was presented by staff at the January 25th work session, to remind you of the changes that we've made since January 25th. We originally held a public hearing on this proposed amendment on the 25th. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on October 21st. This entire document is intended to bring us into compliance with our housing needs analysis and the requirements of House Bill 2001. It is now appropriate that Council consider the amended ordinance. It has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending adoption.
Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council adopt ordinance number 3136.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Stinnett,
Aye.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Soulsby,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin, Counselor Irvin.
Aye.
Okay, okay.
There it is.
Mayor Dowling.
Aye. Okay, so ordinance 3136 passes. Brings us to item B, first vote on ordinance amending Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 14 Development Code to adopt surface water management. Ms. Ferguson.
Council has now held 2 public hearings on the proposed amendment of the Municipal Code Title 14 Development Code to adopt Chapter 14.35 Surface Water Management. Again, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this ordinance in November, on November 18th, 2020, and recommended approval to Council. It is now appropriate that Council consider the ordinance. The ordinance has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending adoption.
I have an ordinance number.
3138.
Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council adopt ordinance number 3138.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Stinnett,
Aye.
Counselor Flack,
Aye.
Counselor Soulsby,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Mayor Downing.
Aye. Brings us to item C, resolution establishing appropriations within the 2021 budget for the expenditures of unforeseen specific purpose grant procedures from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Mr. Myers.
So you have before you this resolution that appropriates a portion of the $328,944.98. About 60,000 of it, $60,370.76, was spent and reimbursed expenditures in the previous budget. So we won't be appropriating the full amount. So if you added everything up in the resolution, it will be $60,370 less because we won't be appropriating that. That was in the previous budget. Basically, this is a reimbursement grant, and it came out during the current fiscal year, and so we were able to reimburse still back to some of those from the previous budget. It's a reimbursement grant, and so we had to spend the money in order to get it. And so we spent it out of a number of line items in the budget that had other projects or things that we were going to do this year in the budget. And we'd still like to do those. And so we need to put this reimbursement back into those line items so that we can do some of those other projects and have that funding. We've also overexpended some of those line items to do this to do these things through this grant. And so we want to fix that as well to make sure the budget does balance at the end of the year. So you have the resolution that appropriates that money into the various places. You'll notice the one biggest place where we had the most expenditure was in the general reserve fund. And if you remember last meeting in the financial report, this is one of the items that we were waiting for with the general reserve. We had a yellow light for the general reserve because we'd spent a lot of things out of the general reserve for COVID, and this reimbursement will put that general reserve back into a green light and take care of that fund. You also received and attached to the agenda is a breakout of the care for homeless that was asked for on Friday, and you can see how that broke out. The hand wash stations that we put around the community, primarily there's a hand wash and restroom in front of the community center, and the cleaning of the restrooms throughout the community that we opened up for unsheltered to use cost us about $16,000 for that service that we contracted out. The shower trailer and the prep of the shower trailer site was $71,000. We've also spent, I think, $1,700, which was not reimbursed yet. And since we've spent everything, we will hold on to that, and hopefully other funding comes and we can reimburse for the towels and some of the materials for the shower trailer. And the warming shelter site preparation and tents and the fencing and all of that stuff, the first aid supplies, propane and the heaters and stuff, came to about $80,000, just a little over $80,500, just under $500,000. So $500, $80,496. So that's a breakout of that. The second sheet breaks those expenditures out so you can even see them in detail, what the individual things were that added up to those features, those different categories. So any questions?
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Richard, I want to thank you very much for that breakdown.
You bet.
Do you have a resolution number?
2034.
Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution 2034.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Anyone from the audience wish to comment? Mr. Taddy, you're muted still.
There we go.
Yep.
Dwayne Taddy, 1803 West Main Street, Cottage Grove, Oregon, 97424. Hey, I'm wondering what kind of tents we got for 18 grand.
Those are the large canopy tents, a 20 by 20 that is being used as the hospitality tent, a number of 10 by 10s, and a number of 10 by 20s as well.
tents for folks to sleep in, but thank you.
Yeah, they're not to sleep in. Yeah, these are protections over the porta potties so that it's dry by those. We will also use those for other things as the warming shelters close. So there'll be event tents as well and be able to use for other things. Yeah.
Any other comments? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Stinnett,
Aye.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Soulsby,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Brings us to item D, a resolution declaring surplus real property and authorization for sale to adjoining property owner. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the companion item for the public hearing that the council just held. As I stated earlier, the city came into ownership of the parcel tax lot 1800 in 2011 when it was sold to the city for $30 by a quitclaim deed from Lane County. In August of 2020, the mayor and city council received an offer in writing for $1,000 plus the cost of professional surveying services for a portion of this parcel tax lot 1800. The offer to buy a portion of the tax lot was made by Double H Investment Corp LLC. This group is currently in the process of building a project that would be 40 dwellings on the parcel, and this piece of property would be incorporated into that project. Currently, there are no buried city infrastructure within the parcel, and the adjoining property owner, Jack and Linda Hartness, for years has performed maintenance on this piece of property. So it's staff's recommendation at this time for council to consider declaring the piece of property as surplus and authorize the city manager to sign the relevant documents in support of the land sale to Double H Investment Group LLC.
This is 2035.
Yes.
Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution 2035.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Stinnett.
Just maybe a quick question. Does the developer plan to bring city infrastructure to the lot that doesn't already have it, or is it going to continue to?
So as the parcel is developed, the developer will be supplying water, sewer, and storm to the property for their development.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Stinnett,
Aye.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Soulsby,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Brings us to item 8, business from the city council. Item A, discussion regarding water rights and water management and conservation plan. Mr. Stewart.
All right, thank you. So we have guests this evening, Adam Sussman and Tim Henkel from GSI Water Solutions, Inc. The city contracted back in 2011 with GSI Water Solutions, Inc. to seek an extension of time and then certificate a 4 million gallons per day water right for the operation of the Raw River Water Treatment Plant. GSI applied with the state of Oregon Water Resources Department, and the extension of the certificate were challenged in court. The city was awarded a 2 million gallon per day water right certificate, and the remaining 2 million gallons per day was unperfected. GFI applied for an extension of time to certificate the remaining 2 million gallons of water rights. The city was recently notified the extension of the proposal. The extension is proposed for approval with conditions. So tonight, Adam and Tim are here to discuss the status of the city's water rights. the water rights available for use at the Raw River Water Treatment Plant, and the Water Management and Conservation Plan, and other water resources department conditions regarding the city's water rights. So at this time, we'll invite Tim to give his presentation, or Adam, excuse me.
Good evening. And Richard, were you going to am I already presenter? You're on mute.
Yeah, you're a presenter already. You just need to click on the share screen down there on the bottom, and
Got it. Okay.
and it should pop up here. There it goes.
Take care of all the technology. Okay, so everybody can see that okay? Richard, you good? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. I've done several of these presentations like this, and it's kind of hard if you can't see anybody to know if anyone's out there or not. So thank you for the body language. Appreciate it. So my name's Adam Sussman, and I'm with GSI Water Solutions. I've actually been working with the city since about 2007, so on and off for many years on water rights issues. And I'm here with my colleague Tim, and I think Tim's out there somewhere, and Tim will join me in a little bit for this presentation. So I want to warn you that we're going to try to cover a lot of ground. You're going to be pretty excited because you're going to get a lot of cocktail party information, trivia about water rights. And I also want to make sure, Richard, because it's kind of hard to see everybody, to just make sure if anyone has any question at any time, please interrupt us, stop us, so that we could slow down and explain whatever it is you're getting hung up on. So here we go. We'll start rolling through this. This is kind of the setup for the presentation. I always like to start off with what I call kind of a water rights 101. Maybe by the time we're done with this, we might be in the 300 level for some of you. The reason I do that is because we throw around a lot of terms that Tim and I and Faye, we use these terms a lot, and to many of you, they may be very foreign terms. So I want to make sure that we do that. There is a long history with some of the city's water rights, so we'll cover that. And then we'll kind of get into what is a WMCP, what is a Water Management Conservation Plan, and what does that process look like, okay? And again, just interrupt us at any time. So I always start with kind of just a simple setup of the life history of a water right. And this graphic, I think, in a very simple way shows when you want to appropriate water in actually most of the Western United States, but especially in Oregon, that water belongs to the public, and it's managed by, in this case, the Oregon Water Resources Department. And you need to make an application to get access to the public water. And you may have heard, like when people talk about a priority date of a water right, the priority date actually gets assigned to an application when it's submitted and deemed to be complete at the Water Resource Department. So you may have heard the saying, first in time, first in right, older water rights are better. That's all based on when the application was made. Once that application is made, and I should say that when you make this application, you have to be very specific about what source of water, how much water do you want, where are you going to use the water, for what purpose, and where are you going to divert the water. So there's a lot of very detailed information that goes in that application, and that results, if you make it through the process, in a permit. In a water right permit is sort of like the state saying, okay, you asked for a bunch of water to do this thing. Here's the permit. You now have the opportunity to build the infrastructure and do whatever it takes to develop that water use. So that's what the permit, it's sort of permitting you to proceed with your project. When you get a water right permit, it's not like you have forever to build the infrastructure and use it. because if I get a big water right on a small stream, that might preclude Faye from getting a water right on that same stream. So I have to sort of diligently show that I'm actually using the water. I'm not just kind of sitting on it to somebody else's detriment. And so if those timelines expire, that doesn't mean you're done. It just means you have to apply and seek an extension of time where you can ask the state, hey, I haven't quite finished doing this and I have a really good reason, so I need more time. And a lot of this conversation tonight is going to be about the city submitting an extension application for a permit. So if you hear me throwing around those terms, this is where they all come from. This is sort of the genetic history of a water right. Just so that you know, when you get to the end of this this process, you will receive a certificate at the very end. That's when you got your permit, you show the state in a report that you developed that you've used all the water, and at the end of all that, they issue you a certificate. And the reason I'm even telling you that is that as a municipal water provider, having a water rights certificate is the highest level of protection you could afford your water right. So it's a place that you want to get, okay? Is there any question? I don't see any in the chat. Okay. So there's your water rights 101, and we'll come back to these terms. Yes, I think I do see a couple of questions. So
does this pertain to private citizens as well as to municipalities, this process?
It does, yes. I should have mentioned that. It's for basically anybody that wants to appropriate the public's waters. There's a few exceptions where a water right's not required. They're mostly for the use of groundwater, but they're pretty limited. Yes, I think we had another question.
Yeah, so I was actually on the council when all of this transpired, and back then we actually had a water rights attorney speak to us about transferring our water rights from the Dinner Creek, Prather Creek, and Lane Creek, where we had certified rights back to the 20s. And my understanding at that time is we were just transferring that water right down to Row River, which should have already had a certified 2 million gallon a day right. So are you going to talk about the transfer versus application process, or is there any difference between those?
Well, thank you very much, because that's a great question, and it's a point that I overlooked, and we would get to it in the next slide, but thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Just in that, when you have a certificate, there is an opportunity to modify it, just like the counselor was saying, that you could change, for example, in this case, where you divert the water. For example, instead of way up in the upper watershed like it used to be, you could actually modify the water right so that you could divert it at the Row River water treatment plant and use it for municipal use within the city. And the city has actually done that. And I'm going to cover that in this next slide when I show the whole portfolio of the water rights. But thank you for reminding me about that, because that's a really important term that we're going to use, okay? Any other questions or reminders? That was a good one. All right. And it's good to have a counselor on board that's been through this whole long history with us here. So, okay, so this slide will surely probably make your eyes spin because it's a lot of information, but I wanted to show this. This is something that's in your water management plan, maybe a little simplified version of it here, but this is kind of a summary, if you will, of all of the city's surface water rights. And can you guys see, since someone nod their head, can you see my cursor moving across? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm just going to kind of walk through these a little bit because I think it'll be helpful. So here it just says, what's the source of water of the water right? Here's the permit number. Remember, we talked about the permit, and every permit has a number. And then when you get a certificate, you get a special number that goes with that too. And then just like the counselor asked, sometimes you do a transfer, and that even has a number associated with it. These are all the priority dates. So these are when water rights were applied for and deemed to be complete. These are the different kinds of uses that the water rights are for. They're basically all for municipal use. And then we get into like, this is how much water they're for, and this is all in cubic feet per second. And it's kind of hard to put that in context for you. 1 cubic foot per second is about 450 gallons a minute. So it's a lot of water, just 1 cubic foot per second. So that's what the water rights authorize here. A couple of your water rights have an annual volume limit, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And then they have some completion dates that I'll talk about as well. So just kind of going through these fairly quickly, this water right is one that I think the city acquired obviously a long time ago from the Coast Fork for some kind of fire system or fire suppression system that was in place at the time. That's really all it can be used for. And I don't believe that the city has used that for a very long time, but it's one of your water rights. These next water rights from Lang, Dinner, and Prather Creek, these are all the ones that the counselor was talking about. Of course, these are all the water rights that the city relied on. I don't know, until you got your first edition of the Row River Water Treatment Plant up and running. So these water rights, which are very old, right? 1909, 1925, 1928. These were the water supply for the city of Cottage Grove, way up in the watershed, way up above the reservoir. There was a pipeline that came down, a special little water treatment plant that filtered some of the water and sent it to town. And Faye could probably tell you way more about that than I can. But those are the original water rights. One point I want to make about these water rights from up in the upper watershed, even this one with this transfer number, if you add up all these numbers, that's a big number. That's like almost 14 CFS. And you might think, my goodness, the city has a ton of water under their water rights. And my response to that would be, on paper, you do. But the thing to remember is that a water right is not a promise that water will be in the river. This amount of water might be up there right now after all the rain and snow we're getting. But in the heat of summer, when you need the water the most, probably a third of this amount of water is up in the upper watershed available for your appropriation. So you have to, when you look at water rights, you have to not only think about what does it say on paper, but what's the reality in terms of what's on the ground? What is Mother Nature providing from that source of water, okay? This water right, you'll notice that we say Lang Creek twice. This water right, which is a certificate, is still kind of up in the upper watershed. I like to describe it as being held in reserve for the city to use in the future. But this portion was transferred, just like the counselor mentioned, and some portion of it was transferred down so that it could actually be diverted and appropriated from the Row River Water Treatment Plant. So again, thank you for reminding me to talk about that. We have these next two water rights that I think are pretty interesting. These certificates 87027 and 87028. This was something we worked on with the city back in 2009, 2010, where these used to be the water rights that were used to irrigate the city's golf course, right? But of course, you guys have done a fantastic project by reusing your treated wastewater and use mostly treated water for that process. So we were able to change those for municipal use, and they could be diverted either at, I think Faye calls it the golf course point of diversion, or they can be diverted at the Row River Water Treatment Plant for municipal use. So either one, which was a fantastically smart move by the city to do that. When you do that, when you change an irrigation water right to municipal use, they don't completely lose their genetic beginnings. They're still limited to the irrigation season, which is about March through October, and they have a limit on them in acre feet. Okay, so that's why these have a volume. So when you get an irrigation water right, there's a limit of how much you can use. And so this makes these water rights very important for the city, but they also can potentially run out of volume during the peak season. So we have to be happy that we have these, but use them with caution. Okay. I'm going to stop for a moment before I get to the last couple ones, because this is, I think, the emphasis I want to make is the last couple. And just stop. Any questions, comments? Yes, I see a hand up, I think.
Do you know when or what section of code refers in the Oregon code refers or establishes this process? And is there a resource that we can look up the kind of the history of the legislation establishing these water rights?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. Oregon sort of adopted its water code in 1909. That was the original adoption of the water code, and then they've just added and added and added. But I can do that offline. Maybe Faye, I can send you an email. There's each one of these. I guess maybe I should say this. Each one of these has a file and an application and the processing documents online at Oregon Water Resource Department. So you could go look online for any one of these. And there's a lot of information at the Water Resource Department about all the statutes and rules that they use to process a water right. Okay, perfect. And I can get you that information through Faye, okay?
Oh, no worries. It happens to be on that site.
I'm sorry?
That site references the authority by statute, so thank you.
Great. Okay, yeah. It's a great question. Thanks for asking. Okay, so the last couple of lines that I want to cover here are what we really want to focus on, and I'm going to get into a little bit more history of these in just a second. And Faye kind of talked about it, but I just want you to focus on these two lines. We have two water rights. They have the same permit number, so they started together. And like Faye said, we have a certificate, 91536, for about half of it, okay, for about 2 million gallons a day, which is a conversion of 3.1 CFS. And then the other half of the same permit is still a permit. And we are working, that's the one we're working on getting the extension for. And you could see in the notes there that we're actually asking the state to give us an extension until 2043, and they are getting ready to approve that request. Okay, so that's going to be my focus on this next slide here. So, and again, I'm focusing on this permit, which now got broken into two pieces. In 1999, the timeline to develop that permit expired, and the city needed to submit a permit extension. This was before I was involved with the city. In 2005, and I was actually in 2005 still working at the Oregon Water Resources Department. In 2005, there was some legislation passed, and it was really focused on municipal water rights, just like the cities. That, remember, if you look back, this permit was established in about 1977. And so it had multiple extensions, and there were many water rights for municipal use with multiple extensions of time. And finally, it came to a head where environmental groups were successful in passing some legislation that said, you know what? If some of that permit isn't being used yet and it was issued a long time ago, we think things have changed and we think that we should look at that. We think we should review it to see if that permit is still good for the environment. And if it doesn't maintain the persistence of listed fish species in the stream, we think it should be conditioned so that it does. That was a big deal in 2005. There was a lot of angst over the legislation that came out in 2005. When it came out, the Water Resources Department interpreted the legislation and in fact adopted rules to say, well, you know what? This fish persistence conditioning, it doesn't apply to any water that was used prior to you submitting your extension application. So the department was very clear that that was their interpretation of the statute, and in fact their own rules interpreted it that way. So the city, who had just finished building the expansion, or maybe, I guess it was maybe the new Row River water treatment plant, was able to pump all 4 MGD and show that they used all of the permit in 2007. And they submitted that to the state saying, okay, we've done that. We'd like to move through this process and get our certificate. And according to you, OWRD, none of this conditioning applies to our permit. Well, that was challenged, not so much because Water Watch of Oregon wanted to pick on Cottage Grove. I think they saw this as a statewide issue. How does this statute apply to permit extensions? Because there are permit extensions, there are hundreds of them around the state of Oregon that this applied to. And they said, oh no, we interpret it to mean that it applies to any water not used before the completion date. Well, remember what I said up here, the completion date is 1999. So they were saying any water that you didn't use prior to 1999 should go through this fish persistence process. There was and Richard, I'm sure, remembers all the gory details of this. There was a long administrative hearing that the city and OWRD prevailed on. I mean, OWRD was really in the lead of this, defending their decision. And administrative decision was made by a hearing officer that was in favor of the state, and it ended up going to the Court of Appeals. And guess what? The Court of Appeals agreed with Water Watch that in fact, half of the water that wasn't used by 1999 was going to have to go through an extension with this whole fish conditioning process. So at the end of all that, the city ended up with a certificate for 3.1, or half of the permit, because they had used all of that prior to 1999. And for the other half that they hadn't used prior to 1999, we have to submit an extension of time, and we have to go through this process where the permit gets conditioned for fish persistence. And you are going to be required, as part of this final order approving your extension, to have a water management and conservation plan. And in that water management and conservation plan, you have to articulate why it is you need access to this 3 CFS under the permit over the next 20 years. So yes, I know that was a lot. That was a lot for me to explain, but I hope, please interrupt. Yes.
So So now I'm confused because we were using 3.6 million gallons a day because Lane was 1.6, Rao was 2. And that portion of the transfer, it doesn't sound like you're considering that as far as what we were using as a city before. Because like I said, when we built Rao, that was actually something else. I wanted us to increase capacity when we're spending all that money and we didn't. And so I guess I'm now just trying to understand why that transfer amount isn't at play here.
Well, the transfer is definitely at play when we think about the city's long-term water supply. And we have a slide that we're going to get to in just a few slides that shows you how it fits in. But for this whole conversation about, I mean, that transfer wasn't there prior to 1999. So in 1999, you had the 3.1 CFS of the permit at the Rao River, and we really have to now get an extension for this other half of the permit. But I understand your question, and hopefully when we get to the slide where we show kind of your portfolio, I'll answer it. But this is why we're here. I mean, we're here for a lot of reasons, but we're here to tell you you're in the middle of this process to get an extension of time for this permit. It's going to end up with fish persistence conditions, and you're going to have to submit a water management and conservation plan. Richard, did you want to?
I think Councilor Irvin had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that going for extensions and putting together plans certainly extend timelines, and you know, it's conditional that the permit gets accepted and everything. Can you speak to, and maybe you'll do this later anyway, but speak to the investment and ongoing kind of cost, so to speak, order of magnitude kind of having a fish persistence plan in place and having this WMCP in place? Does it add additional or require additional ongoing resource to have that? Just to kind of quantify the cost to the city, you know, that obviously gets passed on to everyone else of the measures that that Water Watch is wanting to make sure are in place.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I guess I'll kind of answer it in two parts. The fish persistence conditions, those are just something that happen to you and are going to be a condition in your permit. So you don't have to have a plan or do anything other than, you know, maybe there would be a small amount of resources, Faye, to be understanding how much of your permit is impacted on a daily basis. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide. But that's just more something that happens to you. It is true that developing a water management and conservation plan becomes kind of a, I guess, an ongoing responsibility for the city, right? Because when it's approved for a 10-year period. In 5 years, every 5 years, you have to submit a progress report. Every 10 years, you have to update the plan and renew it. Okay, so that those are additional impacts to, you know, your resources. And as Tim will explain, every one of these plans requires the city to do certain things. Many of these things the city is already doing, and they're doing a really dang good job at it. But there are some things that you're committing to doing that you have to do in order to have an approved water management and conservation plan. So I don't know that I could put a dollar number on it, and Faye, maybe that's something we can work on, but no doubt it will result in ongoing maintenance, if you will, of your conservation plan. Okay. Any other questions before I go to the next slide? Okay. So since I haven't made your head hurt quite bad enough yet, I thought I'd try it with this slide. I want to just take a couple minutes and see if I could just give you a sense of what these fish persistence conditions mean and how they work, okay? So this is, here's several years of information from 2000 to 2020. And this is showing stream flow that was measured at a gauge in the river near the city, okay? So we have years, we have flow measured at a gauge, and these are flow targets, what I'm going across here. And I'm really only focused on the spring and summer months because that's when this stuff's important. So when the Department of Fish and Wildlife was sent your permit to review for fish persistence conditions, they were looking at 3.1 CFS. They took, I don't know, Faye, a couple years to do this. And at the end of all that, they came back and said, okay, these are the flow targets that we're going to focus on that need to be at this stream gauge on the river. And when these flow targets are not met, we're going to require a proportional reduction of the use of your permit. So if you're missing this July flow target by 20%, then you have to reduce the use of your 3.1 CFS by 20%. So they describe that as kind of a share the shortfall. So this will be a condition in your extension that applies only to the 3.1 CFS that's getting an extension, not to any of your other water rights, not to the certificate that you got for the Row River, not to the transfers that will bring down from the upper watershed, only this one water right, okay? And you can see here, I mean, if you kind of start getting the gist of this table, the darker the color, the worse the impact, okay? So there's not a lot of really dark red on here, but what this is showing you is, you know, in the year 2000, in April, based on historic information, you would have gotten cut back from the 3.1 to the 1.96. And to the commissioner, to the counselor with the question about, you know, the Lane Creek water right, for example, this is where we need to start thinking about how do we use all the city's water rights in a diverse portfolio, right? Some have conditions, some don't have conditions, some are certificates, some are from the upper watershed. But this is kind of showing you the gist of, at least historically, how those fish persistence conditions would impact you. I thought this was actually pretty interesting because to me, after I studied it for a while, there is kind of a distinct, I don't know, pattern, I guess, that I would see is that if you look in the early, you know, I guess I call them the spring months, right? When the flow target's 190, right, cubic feet in the stream, that's where you got all the really dark red. So to me, that's kind of a good thing. I mean, it's not really a good thing that your water right's getting impacted. It's a good thing that the worst impacts are early in the year, right? Because earlier in the year, you tend to not have your maximum day demands. Your maximum day demands tend to occur more like August or September, where you've got 3 or 5 days of, you know, 95 plus weather, which doesn't mean we can't get those in May or June, but I think that's kind of helpful. And then when you get to July and the flow targets are dropping down to 100, where you really need this water, the impacts, there's still an impact there, but it's not as severe as early in the year. So I don't mean to sugarcoat this in any way. I think the city and the state of Oregon, when they went all the way up to the Court of Appeals, they were Well, they didn't want to get fish persistence conditions because everyone knew that it would impact your ability to use the water right. This is the outcome of that process after statutes being passed, court battles being fought. This is the outcome that the city will have when the permit is extended. Questions? Yes.
So I'm assuming cities that go forward from here trying to certify rights will end up having to go with, ground wells or more reservoirs, or, because how do we as a state, and I know that some of this is anti-growth, but, how do our cities keep up with the demands? We've got fire suppression, we've got, a number of really critical things that the water, support, in addition to our watering our lawns. So how are cities, I assume they're going to end up going more with wells and more storage. Does that sound right?
It does. This certainly, again, I think the city of Cottage Grove is very fortunate in that you have a really nice, diverse portfolio of water rights that we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, that's why, I work for the Oregon Water Utilities Council that's been working since the early 90s to be able to get access to some of the stored water in the 13 Willamette Basin reservoirs, for example. Right now, cities can't even use that water. So it's because of things like this that they've been spending, years trying to get access to that water. And you're right, doing creative things like putting water in aquifers and doing aquifer storage and recovery and storing water and groundwater. You're absolutely right. This makes things harder, and it makes people have to be a little bit more creative. I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Do you know if Oregon permits any export of Oregon water to other states?
Oregon has some pretty strict laws about that, about interstate and even interbasin transfers. And if it's a not very much water, that actually has to be approved by the Oregon Water Resources Commission. So the short answer is no, we really don't do any of that kind of thing in Oregon.
I guess a follow-up to that, I'm just thinking about the history of LA and anything downstream of some of the major water sources that went through California. But do you have any sense on the kind of percentage of the origination of water in our state versus what's supplied from out of state just through natural processes?
No, not off the top of my head. A lot of the water in Oregon is generated in Oregon, but we do have some big interstate and and international, right? Like the Columbia River, which starts in Montana and then flows through Canada. But no, I couldn't tell you. But I would say a high percentage of it is generated in Oregon. I couldn't tell you the number. So, man, you guys, that's like water rights 400 here. This is your fish persistence conditions, okay? And again, what I want to do is I'm going to hand it over to Tim here for a few minutes. Is that you got two things going on. We have applied for this extension, and I want to be really clear, as Faye did. We've submitted it. The state has reviewed it. We asked till 2043, which is a really long time. We have these fish persistence conditions attached to it. We've run through the public process, Richard. The protest period is over, and we're just kind of waiting to coordinate the approval of that extension with your water management conservation plan. So it kind of is traveling through the state as a package. We don't want to kind of keep them separated from one another. So the next big thing that we're trying to do is get your water management and conservation plan submitted to the state of Oregon, and to have that approved. And Tim, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Tim chat for a few minutes, and then Tim, I'll just stay the presenter, so just let me know when you want me to advance to the next slide, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Adam. Good evening, council members and others. What I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about water management conservation plans and what's included in them, particularly yours. Again, we helped the city put together their WMCP, and the main components that we want to talk with you about are here listed on the screen. So historic water use, we'll get into that briefly. I want to talk about your conservation measures and associated benchmarks. Your water curtailment plan that's a part of the water management conservation plan. And then finally talk about the demand projections that we've made for you relative to your water supply. And keep in mind as we go through these few slides discussing what WMCPs are, that the rules that describe are very prescriptive in what a WMCP can include. We didn't really go beyond what those rules require. So let's take a look at the next slide, Adam, please.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just for everyone, it's not really a creative writing exercise. It's very, very, very prescriptive for sure. Okay, Tim, here you go.
Cool. Great. Well, this is the historical consumption. It's the amount of water. It shows the amount of water that all your customers combined have used over between 2014 and 2019. There are a couple interesting things about this slide that I wanted to share. First of all, between those 6 years, your use has really fluctuated right around 400 million gallons per year. There's not a lot of variation. There is variation, though. For example, in 2018, and typically when we see these highs and lows, they represent years that were quite warm. And when the summers are quite warm, long, hot days for many days in a row, we see outdoor water use increase significantly. And so 2018 is a good example of that and why that is a little bit higher than previous years. The other thing that I thought was interesting is and that I wanted to share was that your residential customers are your largest block of customers by far. And this is not uncommon at all for municipalities throughout Oregon that we work with. And then your second closest, but still a ways off in terms of total use, is the commercial class. Adam, next slide, please. And feel free.
I was going to ask Tim if there's does anyone have any questions about so far what's in a water management and conservation plan? This slide in particular. Okay. Next slide.
Cool. The other requirement is to include water conservation, identify water conservation measures, and describe how you're going to implement them. As Adam mentioned, you guys have a lot of the requirements associated with the WMCP you guys already have met, and that is true for water conservation measures in many ways. We just had to make some minor tweaks to the program to meet the rule requirements. And by at least one measure, the way the city manages your water supply, it suggests that it's very efficient. And the way we know that is because annually the city is required to do a water audit, which basically end result shows what your water loss is. And Oregon Water Resources Department have set a gold standard, something for all entities, municipal water suppliers to attain, and that is 10% water loss or less. You'll be happy to know that the city is slightly above that. At least the 5 years that we did an analysis for, and you're right around 12%, a little bit lower than 12%, which is great. There are many, many communities that would love to be in your shoes. Another interesting component that I wanted to describe, the other interesting water conservation that I wanted to describe is your meter testing and maintenance program. Again, that's another requirement. The city, as you know, recently replaced all of your customer meters with this new AMI meter technology, which is great because new meters register more accurately than old meters for you, which means that when you calculate your water loss will be more accurate. It won't, if meters are under registering, your water losses will be much higher. And so the meter testing and maintenance program, because the meters are so new, it's mainly a reactive program, and that's entirely appropriate. And by reactive, what I mean is that the city will inspect a meter if a customer calls and says, hey, I think my meter is broken or registering incorrectly. The city will also go check out meters if the utility billing system flags meters that may have failed or may show unusual use for whatever reason. So that's another example of a water conservation measure. The next one I wanted to share is about your public education program, and just a couple examples of what the city has elected to do to get the word out about water conservation, to help customers make decisions to use water more efficiently, or include things in your on your website, include tips on your website. Include tips in the CCR, the annual consumer confidence report that's required to go out that describes water quality, the water quality of your water supply. And then another example of your public education is the city is committed to annually including a brochure or a flyer in the bills that are sent out to your customers. And the last conservation measures we wanted to share is a supplier financed fixture replacement program, and the city has elected to give out low flow shower heads to people upon request that go to City Hall, and these will also be distributed at one or more city events in the year. Any other questions about the water conservation measures?
And Tim, I was just going to add that, you know, early when I started talking about this, I was saying that this, you know, when you get a water right, it's to use the water in Oregon belongs to the public. So all of these measures that are in these water management and conservation plans from the state are really sort of their way of saying, well, we're giving you this opportunity to use the public's water. This is sort of the minimum that we're expecting from you to be a good steward of it. And again, I think Tim has said the city is, I think, doing all of these things, if not more. So, or most of these things. So that's what it's all about. Yeah. Go ahead, Tim. Yeah. Thank you.
Super. And then, as I mentioned, sandwiched within your water management conservation plan is a curtailment plan. And this plan, the purpose of this plan is to ensure that the city is prepared for an unforeseen water shortage. Typically, these curtailment plans have 3 to 4 stages. Each stage represents the amount of represents a shortage amount. So, for example, in the early stages, the water shortages are typically less severe, and in those cases, then the city would simply ask businesses and citizens to reduce water use voluntarily, and the city would, and in your curtailment plan, we describe what those voluntary measures are. On the other end of the spectrum, if the water shortage is severe, in that case, we would enter stage 3 or stage 4 and require pretty significant curtailment of water use. And again, what the city is asking the customers to do is described in the curtailment plan. And each of those stages are enacted based on a specific trigger, like, for example, what is the demand of your customers relative to your capacity? How has the shortage affected your capacity? So stage 1 is not much, and stage 3 or 4 is fairly significantly. Any questions about the water curtailment plan? Okay.
Thanks, Tim. And I would just add, we work with cities all over the state, and we've worked with several cities that have had to implement their curtailment plan. And I can tell you, every time when you're writing one of these things, you know, it sounds good, but when the shortage happens, it's usually some shade of gray of what you thought might happen. And that's okay. I think the point is that you've got a starting place. You've got a document where you've sort of thought through, how am I going to communicate this to my customers? What are the kinds of things I'm going to ask them to do voluntarily? What are the kinds of things I'm going to require them to do? So I've kind of found it never to be 100% perfect in time of shortage, but I have found that our clients have said, and this is a requirement from the state, that it's really, really helpful. Okay. Thanks, Tim, for all that. I'm gonna go to the next slide, and I think we've got this slide, and then maybe a wrap up, and then we're done here. I think this really goes back to the question that we were talking about earlier from the counselor about how do these water rights fit, and how does this all work? How does it all come together? And the Water Management and Conservation Plan kind of requires you to do that. It makes you lay out, this is my supply. This is sort of, you know, how reliable it is. Is it way up in the upper watershed? Is it really not there in the summer? Does it have a volume limit? Like, what are all the pieces of each one of these things? And then you compare your projected demand for water to your portfolio of supply. That's kind of the end game for this plan. And so we put up here, and I apologize for all these numbers, but your maximum day forecast is about 3.9 million gallons a day. That's your forecasted demand in the year 2040. And we worked a lot with FAA, with population data and current water use, and did some fancy math and got some projections. And that's about 6.1 CFS. Okay, so that's our projected demand in 2040. And again, this is where I caution you, you could look on paper and you could say, oh, wow, I've got all these water rights down at the Row River Water Treatment Plant that add up to 10.1 CFS. So I'm good to go. I've got everything I need. But then we start going through these and saying, okay, well, here's the 3.1 CFS certificate that we got the first half of the permit. And remember, these are the two water rights with the volume limit. So in terms of water supply planning, we're kind of setting those aside, saying, yes, those are good, but in a hot, dry, long water year, we may use those up before the end of the season. So we're kind of setting those aside. And what we're saying in our water management and conservation plan is we're going to rely on this certificate, which we already have. We're going to rely on our permit, the other half of the water right. And to the extent that this is cut back for fish persistence conditions or what have you, then we're going to start using up our reserves, as the counselor mentioned, that we moved down from Lane Creek. And this is going to be, you know, sort of, so between this and this, we will be in excellent shape to meet the 6.1 CFS demand and clearly beyond that. So that's kind of how we describe it in our water management and conservation plan. The water rights we have, the limits that they have associated with them, and what our plan is for the next 20, 40, and beyond that for the city's water supply. Okay, and remember, when I showed you that slide a long time ago, the city does have some additional water rights that they've left in reserve up in the upper watershed, that as we needed additional supply, we could bring some of that down. But again, it's only, those water rights are only as good as how much water is up there to appropriate. When you move it down to the Route River, you don't get more water. You only get what's available at the original place. So we have to be very thoughtful about how much we can depend on those. But that's kind of how our demand projections and supply lay out in this water management plan. Okay, any questions? Yes.
If you were to, at some point down the line, try to transfer some of those rights, and you're saying that it depends on how much water is up there at the time, when you're going through that application process, is that going to also trigger a fish persistence requirement up there? Does that apply to every body of water, or how is that, you know, where's the line drawn in terms of fish habitat and those conditions?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. The fish persistence process was very unique to a certain set of municipal permits that had been in play for a long time and never got developed. So it's a pretty small population. You got caught up in it with about 120 other permits. That will not be replicated on the transfer of the water rights downstream. Right now, that process is a very simple process. I'm loath to predict what that might look like 5 or 10 years down the road, but right now it's a very simple, straightforward process. But it's a great question. Thank you. I think I had another question. No, anyone else? Yes.
I was just hoping that these slides are going to be presented to us later so I can kind of take a little more in-depth look at them later.
Yes, they'll be available for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm happy to follow up with you and Faye at a later time if you come up with some additional questions. Okay, I know it's a lot of information, and I was concerned about giving you so much information, but I think Richard and Faye wanted you to hear the whole story. So there you go. Okay, I think this is the closing slide, as I recall, Tim. Yeah. So Tim has been working really hard and helping to develop this plan, and we have our goal of sending it to the state of Oregon basically at the end of this month. You are required to send a draft of the plan. So Faye has a draft of the plan available. We had to send that to what they call the affected local government, which is yourself, of course, and Lane County. So the county has it, and there's comment period that they can provide some comments, mostly related to, is there something they see that's inconsistent with the city and the county's comprehensive land use plan. We often don't get comments back, but we have to give them 30 days. We'll send that to Water Resources Department, and the goal will be to kind of have the approval of the Water Management and Conservation Plan, which usually takes about 4 to 5 months after you submit it, and we'll have that hopefully ride through the process at Water Resources. So the approval of that plan, which will give you access to the permit, and your permit extension will essentially occur simultaneously. So we kind of keep them together for you. And that should happen, like I said, 4 to 5 months after the final plan is submitted to OWRD in early March. And like I said, when the department approves it, there is some ongoing obligations to have a progress report in 5 years to report on the conservation and management measures that you've taken on. And after 10 years, you need to update the plan. And Tim, have I Is there anything you want to add? Did I miss anything on the end process there? No?
No, you're good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's our last slide. Are there any, open it up to any and all questions about what we just went through?
Mr. Stennett, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a question as much as maybe me trying to characterize and maybe sum up a little bit of what's going on. We're currently operating with half of the 6.2 feet per second that we had requested in the right. I've got that correct. So you've shown us 20 years of how we have utilized that 3.1 feet per second. At first, it kind of looks like, at first glance, it might be alarming that we would be forced to curtail our water use for these fish persistence conditions. But it seems to me that we haven't expanded that right yet. That absent some major growth, some pretty rapid growth that curtailing our use based on the fish persistence is not something that's imminent or something that's going to happen really soon. Is that fair enough to characterize? Or
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization, that it will have an effect on maybe having access to, that second half of the permit. But like I've kind of described it before, because I think the city has done some really good planning, actually, through your different public works folks over the years, that you have a nice portfolio of water in your portfolio. So you'll be able to manage through that just fine. Yes. Does that answer your question?
yes, I just think, it sounds kind of alarming that we might have to do that, but it also looks like we can plan for and be ahead of the game in terms of having to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation and a good takeaway for sure. I think I saw another question.
Yeah, and this might be more for Faye. In the current capacity, like in storage and reserves, if we were not pumping more water out of the river, let's just say, how many millions of gallons do we have? Or maybe in terms of, we had like 2,600 homes or whatever. What I'm trying to figure out, if we had to stop pumping out of the river or for some period of time, how long we'd be able to serve during peak usage.
Yeah, so I don't have that exact number, but I'll share with you that we, in our reservoirs, if at the time we were curtailed, we would have possibly up to 4.1 million gallons of water stored in the current reservoirs. I've been told that would supply the city currently under its use for I believe 2 to possibly 3 days if we weren't able to make any more water. So that's when we would probably be discussing curtailment, encouraging folks just to, if we couldn't produce for a period of time, to basically use it as an emergency purposes only. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to locate reservoir sites and hopefully get on a plan to get some built in the next 3 to 5 years, so that we have some additional storage that's available to us and could feed the city longer if we had a situation.
Are those reservoirs kept at capacity generally, or are they at that 4.1, or do they go through staggered maintenance where your capacity drops any major percentage lower than that?
Yeah, so winter months we don't store as much water because the water usage is lower by the day by the residents, and so we might fill it half to 2/3 of the way full. In the winter months, that we also do that to try to keep our chlorine content and keep the water within regulations that we need to abide by to serve to the citizens. Now, in the summer months, we'll be running our water treatment plant 24 hours a day, and we'll try to keep closer to the reservoirs closer to full during the summer months when the use is much higher.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Fay, with growth maybe approaching in 5-10 years up to 12, 13, 14,000, is there any plans for more reservoirs to be built in our area?
Yeah, we're currently, Councillor Robert, so we're working on 3 locations. We've found 3 locations that we believe would adequately support reservoirs. One which is on the east side. We're hopefully going to close on the property very soon, and can be focusing on getting a reservoir up above the current reservoirs. And then we have 2 locations on the west, one Sunrise Ridge location that really will be triggered as the next phase of Sunrise Ridge moves forward. And then we've been also engaging in a location that the Lamonti Water District has to the south of that, but on the west side, that would also accommodate a reservoir. So hopefully within the next 5 or 10 years, we'll have reservoirs in sight and potentially be closer to 6 to 7 million gallons of reservoir capacity. Actually, no, closer to 8 million gallons, we hope.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to share all that. And like I said, if there's follow-up questions, Faye, from any of the councilors, just let us know. We'll see what we can do to answer them. And Faye, I'm sure we'll keep you up to date on the process as we submit the plan and get feedback from Water Resources. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam and Tim, for the presentation this evening.
You're welcome.
Sure.
All right,
Thank you.
have a good evening, everybody. We're going to drop off.
Okay, item 8B, Vision Keeper Committee appointments. Is Ms. Cowens on here?
No, she's not.
Mr. Myers, you take this?
Yeah. So you have before you some appointments for the Vision Keepers Committee. We had the council members met and interviewed some at-large applicants. We had 3 positions, 1 partial term and 2 full terms. They've interviewed Dan Hamburg and Cynthia Fisher, and Riley Newman was the 3rd applicant who is currently on the Vision Keepers. So the Vision Keepers also have some lead partners that they've been nominated. Beth Poole from Sustainable Cottage Grove, Jim Gilroy from Downtown Cottage Grove, Crystal Morrison from the Family Relief Nursery, and Shauna Nye from the Chamber of Commerce. The committee has recommended that the council appoint Riley Newman and Dan Hamburg to the at-large positions that expire in December of 22, and Cynthia Fisher to complete the term that was vacated by Christy Inskip that expires in December of 21, and appoint the lead partners that have been nominated to the Vision Keepers.
Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the city council appoint Riley Newman and Dan Hamburg to at-large positions, terms to expire December 31st, 2022, and Cynthia Fisher completing the at-large term vacated by Christy Inskip, which expires December 31st, 2021, and appoint the following lead partner representatives with terms that expire December 31st, 2022, Crystal Morrison, Jim Gilroy, Beth Poole, and Shauna Nye.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Brings us to item C, Audit Committee meeting audit acceptance. Ms. Likens.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The city's audit committee met on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021, both virtually and in person. Present were Audit Committee members Sarah Holmgren and Jennifer Morocco, Councilors Greg Urban and Kenneth Roberts. We also had Gatlin Hawkins of Eisler CPA as the managing CPA on our audit. Richard and myself attended. Unfortunately, Karen Winters wasn't able to attend. The audit was presented with the comprehensive annual financial report, and it can also be found on the city's webpage if anyone's interested. Mr. Hawkins stated that as auditors, their responsibility, as described by professional standards, is to express opinions about whether the financial statements prepared by management with their oversight are fairly presented in all material respects and in conformity with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. He noted it is management's responsibility to present accurate data with no errors and have in place internal controls to detect and/or prevent fraud. A clean, unqualified opinion was issued for the financial statements. He noted that during the course of the audit, they did not encounter any difficulties in dealing with management or in performing and completing their audit. He thanks city staff for their efforts to provide information electronically to minimize the need for audit staff to be present at City Hall to complete their audit during the pandemic. He also commented about the pandemic, that it had just begun during the fourth quarter of last fiscal year, and he expects to see the effects of the coronavirus pandemic and financial expenditures related to the pandemic using grant funding in next fiscal year, which is what you just did this evening with your resolution and making those appropriations. Mr. Hawkins reviewed the audit document, referring to substantial changes from one year to the next. It's staff's recommendation, and the Audit Committee is recommending that the city's financial statements and supplemental information for fiscal year end June 30th of 2020 with the independent auditor's report be accepted and put on permanent file by the City Council.
Mr. Irvin.
Move that the city's financial statements and supplemental information for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020, along with the independent auditor's report, be accepted and put on permanent file by the City Council.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Brings us to item D, intergovernmental agreement between cities of Cottage Grove and Cresswell regarding floodplain development program services. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So legal counsel has prepared an IGA for the consideration between the cities of Cottage Grove and Cresswell for floodplain development management services. The city of Cresswell is interested in entering into this agreement with the city of Cottage Grove for the purpose of administering a floodplain development program within Cresswell. The City of Cottage Grove Public Works and Development Department employs 2 certified floodplain managers in the planning department, whereas Cresswell does not have a certified floodplain manager within their current staff. This IGA would obligate and authorize Cottage Grove to provide floodplain administration services to Cresswell, subject to the terms and the conditions therein. So currently, Cottage Grove's city planner has been assisting Cresswell with their floodplain work under the current IGA for building permit services. Approximately 10 hours of city planner staff has been utilized over the past 2 years. This agreement will formalize the arrangement and allow Cresswell to designate Cottage Grove City Planner as Cresswell's floodplain manager. If there are no questions of me pertaining to this, staff recommends that the City Council approve the IGA between the City of Cottage Grove and Cresswell and authorize the city manager to sign the agreements.
Mr. Irvin.
What is the arrangement of the fees? Is it hourly or is it by the project or kind of per permit? How does that work?
So presently in the agreement with the building services is we charge by the hour and materials, and that's the same arrangement would carry forward in this agreement.
And is that, oh, sorry.
Okay, so does Cresswell pay us back for this in any way?
Yeah, we we bill them quarterly. So presently, right now, we provide them building permit sewer services. So essentially, our building division does all their plan reviews, inspections in Cresswell. We also do that for Veneta and Coburg, along with, of course, Cottage Grove. And we bill that quarterly. And so at the present time, we have billed them for services that the city planner has done. When she incurs it, we do it quarterly, and finance staff does that.
Thank you again, Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Urban, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I was wondering if what the fee is, or if it's listed in the fee schedule and called out.
I don't have it on the top of my head, but I can get that to you. It's presently what Ms. Ferguson's fee is, and that includes her, all the benefits and everything. So I'll let you know what that fee is.
So it's an established fee based on the actual wages and benefits for those positions. So it'll change as we change every year and do the increases and or steps and things like that for employees. So it's based on those actual employee costs.
So I guess the question is it targeted at break even, or are we making something in the arrangement?
Yeah, we get reimbursed for the actual costs that the costs are. There's no markup, and we're not supplying services to Cresswell at a reduced rate and carrying it on City of Cottage Grove time.
Mr. Stennett?
It seems like then we could expect Cresswell's need for a floodplain manager to increase because they're working on a floodplain development program. Is that a correct?
No, actually, in talking with our city planner, she doesn't believe that the 10 hours is going, it'll reflect pretty much what we're doing right now. The only thing this does is just, it allows Cresswell to designate an official floodplain manager for their floodplain program.
Is there any more questions? We have a motion. Mr. Fleck?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve the IGA between the city of Cottage Grove and Cresswell and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Anyone from the audience wish to comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Brings us to item E, vacant Ward 1 City Council position. Mr. Myers.
So we have a vacant Ward 1 City Council position vacated by Councilor Boone as of Thursday night at midnight. And now the council has the opportunity to decide how to appoint a new councilor to that position. In the past, the council has put out an advertisement, requested applications, taken those applications in, reviewed them, interviewed, and selected someone. Also in the past, the council has taken somebody who ran in the last election for the position and pointed them to fill if it was close to an election. So you have a variety of things you could do. The charter does say that the position has to be somebody from that ward and reside in that ward. So all applications would be from Ward 1, or any appointment would be from Ward 1. The position does expire on at the end of December in 2022. So it doesn't have a general election in between. So it would complete its term at the end of 22 and could run for that election and be elected to the next 4-year term. So that's your basic information on what you have. We have talked to the newspaper, and if you do want to advertise, we can get the advertisement in tomorrow morning, and it will be in this week's paper, and be able to get that process moving if you want to move that way. And basically that puts us with the ad going out on the 11th, and we can have it open. We need to decide how long you want to leave it open for to collect applications, and then after that, the council could interview, or you could appoint now, however you want to go.
Mr. Irvin first, then Mr.
Well, I just voiced my support of putting it out, requesting applications so we could do interviews, and for getting it in the papers and to advertise as soon as possible. I think a couple weeks, I think from what we looked at in terms of the schedule, I'm comfortable with. So I guess we'll start it there.
Mr. Fleck?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should send this out. Absolutely. I think we should, go through the whole process to interview and select somebody from Ward 1. Thanks.
Mr. Roberts?
I agree with that too. I mean, I can see here on the screen, there's 4 people from Ward 1 on this meeting. So I would like to do that process of interviews. So I'm all for that.
Everyone in consensus then that that's what that's what we should do? Looks like a thumbs up. So we'll put it out in the paper.
And what do you want to set for a deadline? If we set the 25th of February, is that too early? That gives 2 weeks for applications. Or we could go to the March 4th, but then that kind of pushes it if you want to try to have the person interviewed and appointed by the 8th. Or you could wait and do the appointment on the 22nd. Barring that there's another item on the agenda, the goal setting, that we'd want the new candidate to be a part of as well, that could tell where you want to change that goal setting date as well. So do you want to kind of push the schedule a little tight and have the applications due by the 25th, which gives you basically 1 week to schedule interviews, and maybe you could interview the 8th before the council meeting? Come early that night and interview and have someone seated at the council meeting. We're trying to keep the 8th. No, the 8th is fine. It's the 22nd we're trying to keep short, the February 22nd meeting. We've got a lot of stuff on the agenda already, so.
I'm okay with doing it on the 8th, so.
Okay. 25th sound okay then?
Mr. Stennett, question?
I would assume we could extend it if we don't get applicants, yes?
Right. I mean, yeah, if you don't get applicants, you can, this is completely up to however you want to appoint.
Ms. Soulsby?
I will not be at the 22nd meeting. So, and what was the other date you were looking at?
The 8th would be the day we'd actually appoint or interview. So, could everybody come that meeting early, and we could do the interviews early before the meeting, and then you could appoint on the 8th of March. 1 thumbs up, 2
Yep.
thumbs up, 3, 4. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay. We'll start those and set those up so early. Yeah, that means the 25th, and then we'd know who you were interviewing for the agenda that would go out on March 3rd. So yeah, excellent.
Okay. Mr. Stennett?
Would there be no cap on the amount of potential candidates if we have a lot in the other scenario?
If you have a lot of candidates, it may make it difficult to do the interviewing before the meeting. So we may have to regroup and think about that if you needed to. We could schedule, we'd probably schedule, if we had to, the interviews could be 15 minutes, and we could really push them through quickly to try to get as many as possible before the council meeting. That could give us at 5:30 to 7 enough time to do 5 or 6 applicants. So if there's more than that, then we may have to regroup and have a special meeting to interview on a Saturday or something before the meeting. Yeah.
Mr. Stennett?
Sorry, is there a stock set of questions or a prescribed process for these interviews?
We do have some sample questions, and we can get those out to you. We have an actual application that we used. I believe the last time this was used was with Councilor Irvin and got these questions a number of years ago, and application form, and we can pass that out as we're doing the advertising, and we can get any comments back on that's a silly question or that's a great question or whatever. I think there's a total of 4 questions that are on the form, but it's wide open. You don't ask anything that's not acceptable. You can't delve into some other items, but you can basically, the council can use whatever criteria they need to evaluate the position. There is nothing other than they got to be a qualified elector living in the ward, and breathing, I guess. That's the other one. So yeah.
I think it'd be great to see him if we could. Thank you.
You bet.
Ms. Soulsby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am assuming that this is going to be Zoom, correct?
Yeah, and we could have, applicants could come to the council chambers. We do have that capability now where they could be in there and interviewed on the screens as well as with the people in the room, but it will probably be a hybrid virtual process, yeah. And it will be a public process. I mean, the interviews can be attended by anyone. We kind of ask the candidates not to attend other candidates, but they can. There's nothing saying they can't.
So they can come in here one at a time if they choose to do so.
Yes.
Okay. So we good with this?
So we will
Okay.
set the 25th of February as, we'll actually set the 26th, Friday the 26th is the deadline. That way we'd have the applications in place and available for you with the agenda going out on the 3rd of March. So you'll have those, so you know how it's all set up for March. If we do get more than 6 or more than 5, then we'll talk about that, how we want to do those interviews. Hopefully all of you can come on the 8th of March at 5:30. If earlier is necessary, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Okay, so that brings us to item F, goal setting work session date. Didn't we talk about this last meeting?
We did, but we have a counselor who can't come on the 27th. And so we want to look at another possible dates. Do we want to move it to the 20th? Do you want to move it to April 3rd? What is your preference? We'd like to keep it on a Saturday so we can do 4 hours in a block in the morning and go through that. So how do you want to set that up?
I would like to go for the 13th or the 20th if we can in March, just to get it over in March, because if we're putting it out till April, now we're a third of the way through the year, and that's not a good thing. Ms. Soulsby, you had a comment?
The 20th is great for me, March 20th, or then I can also do April 10th or April 17th.
Mr. Stennett?
I'll be running the half marathon on the 13th. It'd be nice not to have to try to do both. I like the 20th if that works.
20th,
Great.
I see a thumbs up from Mr. Fleck and Irvin. Mr. Roberts, 20th? March 20th.
Yes, sir.
Great.
March 20th looks like a go.
That's wonderful. That'll give us time to put the goals into the budget as well. So wonderful. Will give us time for the new applicant, the new council member, to be able to maybe do some orientation before the goal setting as well. So that'll be good. Great. We will move that to the 20th.
All right. Concerns of council? Anyone? Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Richard, how many applications did we get for the assistant city manager?
Well, you're taking my report away.
Well, then I'll just wait till then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's the second time I've done that. I want to thank city staff for filling in the pothole on 16th Street. That is huge. Question for Richard. What is going on with the house on 6th Street? Looks like they've been backhoeing back there and cleaning up around it. Is that us doing that, or is that the bank?
That is the new owner and their contractors doing the work there. So the bank sold it and they're actually fixing up the house, and I believe they're going to be doing something in the back of the lot as well. So they're actually dividing the lot so that there'll be 2 homes there instead of 1, because 1 will access off the alley, I believe. Is that right? Yeah.
Thank you. And the folks that own Grocery Outlet have noticed more drug use going on behind their supermarket since the trees were cut down for the new development over there. It seems that's where they were hiding out in there. And they're finding more and more drug paraphernalia behind their building. They were wondering that, is there still more plans to light up that part of the bike path
Yes.
in the future?
Yeah, that's one of those projects that we have in the general reserve that we can now do because we've appropriated the COVID money back in that was spent. So yeah.
And they told me that they're talking to the people that own that shopping center. They're going to be putting more lighting in the back of their building too.
Yeah, and I'd suggest they do some video stuff back there as well. And we'll also talk to the police department. Yeah, thanks.
And let's see, I think that that's pretty much it for me. Once again, I want to thank you for the breakdown on the homeless money too. That is excellent. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Mr. Urban.
Yeah, give a brief update on one of the subcommittees, the Lane Economic Development, as a subcommittee, I guess. We had basically the Lane Economic Development kind of gets its the parameters for how it operates through a document called the CED, CEDS. It's basically as I understand it, a funding mechanism for federal dollars, economic development dollars. And so I think it's every 5 years, they have to re-up that document, and that process is going through. And so the new landscape for economic federal development dollars is being put in place, and we'll be voting on it this Thursday. So we just got the presentation today, and it's a little more broad in scope. So hopefully any projects and grants that would be coming through or being applied for would more easily fit with the goals that were set in this new document. So I guess the summary for that would be economic development should be a little less cumbersome in this county and the region that includes some surrounding counties to the north.
Mr. Fleck.
Yeah, I guess thank you to Councilor Urban. I should have mentioned that the El Rapa board will be interviewing candidates for the new director's position this week. Merlin Huff is retiring, and so we will be interviewing several candidates. I think it's Thursday and Friday this week.
All right, thank you for that. And thanks for giving those reports and potential candidates that might be out there. You're on subcommittees as well. So I really like to see these reports be brought back. Your part of your duty as a counselor is being on those subcommittees and reporting back and keeping everybody in the loop of what's going on. So, Mr. Stennett.
On that exact note, I attended the Coast Forks Watershed Council's meeting on the 27th. There's also a plan in the works to meet with some of their staff to go over a little more in depth on the projects that they're working on currently, and I'm excited about the opportunity. So,
thank you, and I appreciate you being at that meeting. And So on the 28th, we had the city day, and I think that's the first time I've sat in front of a computer for 8 hours. But it was a very long day. It was Zoom, and I think one of the few times that Peter Courtney, the Speaker of the Senate, has been a loss for words, and it was an interesting sitting in and listening to all the speakers in there. I was kind of disappointed when they broke us up into regions at the end of the day to talk with our legislative. And I think the closest one that we had was Representative Marty Wilde out of the West Eugene area was the closest to our location that was at that. On something that's a Zoom that you can just sit in your living room and be at the meeting, I didn't see a reason for him not to be at that meeting, and I was very disappointed that we didn't have any representation for our area. The region we were in was pretty much from Roseburg to Salem, so we had a lot of the up north participations in there. But and then the other, you guys know I'm on the Oregon Mayor's Association board. We sent a letter as a group to the governor requesting some feedback and a meeting with the governor on why the restrictions are what they are, and give us data to bring back to our businesses and why they're closed. And they had a meeting set up for today. I got tied up at work and couldn't attend, but I called Mayor Witowski, that's the Beth Witowski, it's the president of the board this year, and said, sorry I didn't miss the meeting. And she goes, you didn't miss anything. There was no meeting. There was no dialogue that we wanted to talk. It was a presentation, and the data that they were giving us was data from other states that they were comparing, that the contact tracing in restaurants from New York or Michigan or wherever they were getting it from was what they were basing our reasoning for closing in Oregon. So it was very frustrating. We're doing a follow-up with it, pushing back, and I'll keep you posted. So from that, we will move into business from the city manager. And Ms. Soulsby?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just figured I should probably let you know, since we're all talking about the committees, that I did attend the Downtown Cottage Grove last planning session, and it meets again on Wednesday. And the merger of EBID and Main Street is going very well, and I will report back their goals when they finalize them.
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks for pointing it out. I didn't see. So, okay, business and city manager. Item A is Travel Lane County update. Mr. Myers.
So we have this evening with us, after sitting through all this wonderful time, Andy Vabora from Travel Lane County to give us another PowerPoint presentation, and you do have share status, so you can share your screen. He's from Travel Lane County, and he's going to give us an annual report, which we didn't have last year. So it'll be hopefully a nice 2-year report.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors, for the opportunity to present to you tonight. And I'm going to see if I can adjust my screen and see you all and my notes. Okay. So I like to come to every city council in Lane County every 8 months to 2 years. And tonight I'll be spending just a few minutes reviewing our industry, how big it is in Lane County, take a look at how Lane County works to increase overnight stays by targeting the 3 target markets that we'll talk about, and then really spend a little bit more time on what this last year has looked like, because it's been really different. But I'd like to again recognize Richard Myers. You might recall Richard was our recipient of the 2019 Community Leadership Award. If you haven't seen his video, it's on our YouTube channel, and I was going to share it in the chat, but I see I can't do that. So I'm happy to share that out with anybody that hasn't seen it. But we really appreciate all that Richard does, and especially kind of wrangling the Oregon Scenic Bikeways Committee. So really appreciate that, Richard, and all your hard work there. In promoting hospitality and tourism in Lane County. So it is a big industry. These are 2019 numbers. We won't get 2020 numbers until probably March or April. But we were a second year over $1 billion in travel spending, 783 million of that in direct visitor spending, first time dollars in the county. So it's big business, and it's a lot of jobs. It also permeates many different parts of the economy, which is what we like to see. Obviously, the big winner is food service and food stores, with about 39 cents of each visitor dollar going to that. Everybody has to eat, drink when they go on vacation, and there's a lot of good eating and drinking opportunities in Lane County. But you can see by this chart, it does spread throughout the entire economy, and that's what we like to see. So let's take a look at, this is a chart out of the semi-annual report that we'll be giving to the Board of Commissioners on March the 3rd. It's July to December room tax receipts, and you can see that, we were steadily growing. We had been growing for over a decade in room tax receipts. And you can see there that we're down about $2 million in this period for this current fiscal year. It's a little bit above what we projected, so that's good, but still the county's taken a big hit in terms of room tax receipts. At Travel Lane County, we're part of a large team that includes Travel Oregon. Travel Oregon is governed by the Oregon Tourism Commission. It's a state-run agency, and they get 1.5% transient room tax at the state level. They also fund 7 regional programs. We happen to overlap with 2 of those. We're in the Willamette Valley region as well as the Oregon Coast region. And so those regional programs are really important as well. They again market a region, but they also have great programs for like co-op advertising and things that we can tap into. They also have some great grant programs that they administer on behalf of Travel Oregon. So we appreciate the relationship with the regional programs. And then we have Travel Lane County. We're a destination marketing organization for Lane County specifically, but we partner with all 10 chambers of commerce in the county, and these are really important relationships. It's around promotions, training, advocacy, and this year it's been really significant in terms of supporting our local business. The business partners are at the core of this team, and those are the businesses that give out the Oregon experience every day, whether it's to a visitor or a resident who's coming into their business. And so we had over 600 business partners, and one of the things that our board voted to do is to work with any business partner that just couldn't re-up their dues this year, saying, you know what, it's more important for you to be part of our organization as we come out of COVID than it is for you to pay those dues. Those dues are important to us, but they're a small part of our overall budget, and it's more important that we have the relationship with all our great business partners. So as a regional DMO, we focus on increasing overnight stays by targeting leisure travelers, convention and meeting attendees, and sports event participants and spectators. I could spend a lot of time breaking down the variety of ways we market to those targets, but it's primarily nearby drive markets within about an 8-hour, one-day drive to our region, and then our fly markets, those direct connections we have through the Eugene Airport. And so this year, it's been a lot different, though, as you can imagine. When the pandemic shut things down, we immediately turned off all of our marketing efforts, and we focused on education and support. We developed a campaign called Love Lane that is still in use today. It's morphed into Love Lane Biz for Love Lane Business, Love Lane Arts. It's been used really well, and there were a few simple goals of that. We wanted to foster community pride in Lane County. We wanted to inform the locals on how they could support their local businesses. And third, we wanted to keep Lane County really top of mind as people were starting to plan for future vacations. And remember, this was back when everything was shut down and everybody's just getting used to all the new guidelines. So we developed, those are the 3 goals that we went after. And then we developed a suite of assets for the businesses. So we had logos that they could use, social media tiles that they could just drop into their social media feeds, and they could customize those. everybody started doing these virtual meetings. So we created Zoom backgrounds that could be downloaded showing iconic places around Lane County. And then all of our content really started featuring, these local businesses. So, get out, support your local business in blogs that we wrote. We promoted some of our partners through our social media. And we also then have those future looking, hey, when you're thinking about planning a trip, think about Lane County. So really encourage people, get a visitor guide, plan your stay here in Lane County as you get out and about. Then we got into summer and early fall, and we were in that transitional period when people could start moving around again. Things started to open up a little bit, and so we developed what we were calling an Instilling Confidence in Travel campaign. And the goals for this were really around being sure that as things started to open up, that we wanted locals to feel safe in their own community. So we had a lot of conversations that were facilitated with the Chamber of Commerce and community members in communities throughout Lane County. But we wanted to be sure that, as things started to open up, that they felt comfortable with visitors coming back into their communities. And there was a lot of discussion about the concerns around that, with visitors coming in and possibly tapping, either the limited amount of groceries that were coming into grocery stores initially, or the hospital services that might be limited, especially in our smaller rural communities. We wanted to recognize the value that visitors have so that visitors would be welcome, and then also wanted local people to be respectful of these new protocols we were all learning about. For the visitors, we wanted them to understand and feel safe that it was okay to come to our county and to visit our businesses, but we also wanted them to be respectful of the businesses and the protocols, and again, everybody getting used to that. And then third, businesses, understand the protocols, the guidelines that were coming down that were changing all the time and still seem to be, and communicate those procedures to their customers, which wasn't always easy. So we developed some PSAs. We also had a great partnership with KMTR KVAL. They did their own PSAs that really supported all of this work. And then we did some longer running versions specific to what the hotels were doing and what the restaurants were doing to be safe, to protect themselves, their employees, and their guests. And so we pushed that out, and really happy with how that turned out. Again, our content, our writing, whether it was the blogs that we were posting, really, again, talking to visitors, even though we couldn't really market outside the area to say, come here. A lot of our campaign, and I'll talk about this in a minute, was really focused on people here in Lane County, but we still knew that people were coming here, whether or not we were inviting them here. So we wanted to be sure, as people were reading about our area and learning about our area, that we kept all of this information right in front of them in terms of how we wanted them to follow the protocols and be good guests as they were coming to visit our area. So we had a leisure recovery campaign that kicked in with some very specific goals. Again, really focused on Lane County. You might have seen some of our staycation advertising. And again, it was really hyper targeted just to people right here in Lane County to say, hey, you know what? The safest thing you can do is get out and enjoy a vacation right here in Lane County, because we bet there's a place here in Lane County that you've never been, and you can support those local businesses. So we really pushed staycations. We also introduced schoolcations, where as we got back into the school year, parents that were kind of dealing with their kids at home, doing school at home, could look at opportunities to go out in the county and have a schoolcation. Because again, if you're going to school virtually, you don't have to be at that building. You don't even have to be at home. You could be over on the coast logging into school, but also taking advantage of some learning opportunities around the county. So again, providing information that it was safe to come here and that people would have a good time. So really wanted to drive demand in overnight stays and inspire that confidence in travel. And so here's a couple of shots of this moment series that we put out. So, these moments brought to you by different communities around the county, also around the holidays that were coming up, on how to plan for safe holidays. So We had a lot of social media ad placement. You can see some of those here, again, focused on some of our lodging partners and the opportunities that folks had to get out maybe and enjoy, you know, a swim hotel, et cetera, as they were taking their staycation. So results, really happy with the results. 320,000 impressions. This is over a 4-week period, and almost 4,000 clicks into the landing pages around this staycation promotion. So really good response over a 1-month period there. We also, as we got further into fall, we really pushed a shop local campaign. This picture here shows a number of items from businesses that participate in the South Willamette Valley Food Trail. So we have an agritourism trail here in South Lane County. And so we worked with Provisions Marketplace and these other businesses to package up a gift basket that you could order and have it sent to your relative in New York if you wanted to for Christmas, featuring items from here in South Lane County. So you can see how many people we reached with this campaign, 335,000, over 700,000 impressions, and again, over 3,000 clicks to the events and deals pages that our businesses were offering up. So really pleased with that, how that's all transitioned. So, you know, our normal year would be advertising, you know, regionally in these airports around the country that serve our airport, in national magazines and such. And now this year, it's all been really highly focused to respect the guidelines that we're all working under and to try to support our local businesses as we all work through this. I wanted to end with just a couple of slides focusing on Cottage Grove specifically. From our leisure side, a lot of featured content focused on Cottage Grove. The Village Green holiday lights, you can see there 1,000 clicks to the content that we provided there. Then lots of blog content and content on our website. You can see some of the examples there. Cottage Grove road trips, a fall getaway to Cottage Grove, you know, discover the covered bridges, outdoor dining. So, you know, just in this last fall period, over 6,000 page views to that featured content that we produced and put out on our leisure blogs and our website. A lot of content collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce. Again, Shauna and the team there, the work that's being done there is fantastic. And we're really excited about all the great things that are happening down there in Cottage Grove. One of those things is we're going to relaunch our ale trail. We had put our trails onto an app that just never really functioned very well, especially as people went out into the wineries around the area. It just didn't function well. So we're relaunching, creating new pages on our website to drive people to those landing pages. And the Ale Trail will relaunch this spring. Excited to have Covered Bridge Brewing Group come on board with us to be a part of that relaunch. And we're looking to, again, get more food trail participants. So our Destination Development Manager, Jeff Malik, I know works really hard around the county on different projects to support our local or our rural communities, I should say. A big part of his work recently is working on these Destination Ready grants. Got a lot of great grant applications in for that. That's a Travel Oregon grant program. You're probably familiar with it. Amanda put together a great proposal for Cottage Grove to fund your construction of your parklets along Main Street. So we're hopeful, we'll keep our fingers crossed that gets approved here, I think later this week. So everybody's waiting to see if those projects get approved. So there's lots of good projects through Destination Ready happening around the county, including in Cottage Grove. On sports, we're going to keep our fingers crossed for this. Again, some of the traditional events. We've got the half marathon coming up. Looks like they've found a way to safely make that happen. Got Try at the Grove, Oregon Grand Fondo again. So we're, again, just hoping things start to improve and more of those in-person events can take place safely and people will really support. There's a lot of pent-up demand out there. And I think that once things get rolling, we're going to see some really fast recovery on some of these outdoor rec types of activities. The Oregon State Sporting Clays Championship is going to happen up in Cresswell, but the bulk of the housing is going to happen down in Cottage Grove. So we're going to keep our eye on that one. we're bidding on a regional Ironman competition, probably 1,000 to 2,000 competitors, and Cottage Grove is one of the potential locations in the county. We've got to put together probably about $80,000 as an incentive package to win that bid. So our Sports Commission staff is working hard on that, and we'll try to get that one here. You're all familiar with the Olympic trials. You might wonder what's going on with the Olympic trials, but last Friday the tickets went on sale again. So they are scenario planning with, looking at the trials with no fans, 25% capacity, 50% or 100%. So as long as the Tokyo Games are going to happen, we're going to have an Olympic trials to select our team. So at a minimum, we're going to have a bunch of athletes and media and coaches here. We're really hopeful that, vaccine rolls out, that some of the restrictions loosen up and we can actually put some fans in that beautiful new stadium. We're so excited to be able to start using the new Hayward Field. The Tracktown is, Tracktown USA is coordinating the trials implementation here, and there is some work around how communities and individual businesses and others can get involved, but they're really kind of leaving it up to those communities to decide what they want to provide. So I think that's going to start to ramp up probably here in the next month or so, because there's been kind of a lull as we've all dealt with COVID. The World Athletics Championships, now called Oregon 22 instead of Oregon 21, coming in about 18 months or so. A lot of work still to happen around that, but that's where the world comes here. It's was going to be the largest event in the world that year in terms of athletic events. Because it got moved to 2022, it'll now share that with the World Cup, because the World Cup will happen in 2022. But it's first time in the United States, and it's going to be an honor to be able to host that. One of the big things around that is obviously housing is always a big issue for these large events that come to our region. So it takes a village, it takes everybody to make that happen. And one of the things I know our Sports Commission staff is looking for are opportunities to set up recreational vehicle villages, pieces of land, other places that have opportunities to host RVs. And so be thinking about that. If something pops into your head where you got the perfect spot, please let us know, because we're going to start lining those up. And we're also going to start a campaign here in the next month, probably, really talking to the community about what an honor it is and what an opportunity is to have the whole world looking at Oregon and South Willamette Valley here as we host these championships, and that we want to be good hosts, that we want to provide a great experience so that those people tell all their friends and they come back again. And so just a little story about that we're already seeing in not so positive a way around housing is, we had somebody who had booked a Airbnb for $10,000 for the World Athletics Championships for the whole event, 10 days. And when they went to click OK, confirm, all of a sudden that $10,000 jumped to $30,000. And so it's a really difficult thing. We have this conversation with our lodging partners all the time too, is you don't want to, kill the golden goose. These things are great. You want to be successful and leverage it, to be successful financially, but you've got to think about the long run too. And we want people to have a great experience, tell their friends, and really build upon hosting these types of events. So we're gonna start talking about that in a very positive way, about what an honor it is, again, to host these championships. On the convention side, conventions and meetings, sales are happening for late 21 hybrid type meetings, and really what people are looking for is a lot of outdoor venue interest, as you can imagine. So I don't have anything specific in Cottage Grove. I don't have anything specific anywhere. It's been a real tough go for conventions, as you can imagine, with the restrictions that we have here in place in Oregon. So, but we are getting lots of great interest, and we're excited to see what happens as the industry rebounds. It has been probably the hardest hit industry in the United States. Over 110,000 businesses lost, 2.5 million people out of work. And in Oregon, just in lodging and in restaurants, employment's down almost 40%. So it's really taken a hit, the hospitality industry, but what we know is the hospitality industry is very resilient, and we're going to work hard and it'll come back. It might take a little bit of time, but we'll be back, and we've got this slate of things that are coming our way. We're going to leverage those, and we'll be back. So really excited about what's lying ahead, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Mr. Irvin?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. What kind of work do you guys do with local or even other social media influencers? I mean, Rick Dancer comes to mind, other ones who do have travel blogs. Do you work directly with any of them?
You know, it's interesting. I was probably Rick Dancer's first client when he started his new business. We did a lot of shows together. I actually sponsored one of his shows every month for the first couple of years. And then we did some work on some longer version kind of vlog formats where we did interviews with local business folks. So had a long-term relationship with Rick. But yeah, social media, our leisure team, we're bringing in media representatives all the time, coordinated through Travel Oregon and our regional partners, but then just some that we connect with as well. So, you know, an example, Cottage Grove was featured in the Oprah online magazine about a year ago, and as one of the, I think, 60 communities to visit in that article. Well, Cottage Grove is going to be featured in Northwest Travel in their March-April issue, focusing on Main Street initiatives and kind of revitalization of Main Street. So do a lot of work with bringing media into the area, doing familiarization tours, getting them excited about you know, what we've got to offer here, and they go back and write about it. And you know, sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, but we work that pretty hard.
Any other questions? Mr. Roberts.
How soon till the numbers for 2020 come out?
You know, usually about March or April. So 2020 will be a mixed bag. You know, some parts of the state, you know, had an interest. It was really interesting, actually. You know, even in Lane County, the summer that the Florence had was almost normal, and actually their maroon tax revenue is actually up a little bit, because when it opened up, you know, you don't really get anybody over in Florence until June, July, August, and then it opened up, and they had pretty much a normal year. So that really helped them a lot. Now, again, they're struggling like the rest of us, and there's a lot of folks that like to see more opportunities for customers in their door. But same thing happened in Central Oregon and up in the gorge. So different parts of Oregon fared differently throughout the period. But again, you can kind of see those numbers. The metro area, Eugene, Springfield, suffered the most, both in terms of occupancy being down, revenue per available room, and average daily rates, which is, you know, all of that combines to get you the revenue, and then ultimately the tax receipts off that revenue. So being down $2 million in the first 6 months of the year, I don't think we'll be down 2 million in the second half, because the second half is usually our down period anyway, through the heart of winter and then into spring. We are really planning in terms of cash flow on the Olympic trials and some of these other big track meets to have fans in the stands. So if that doesn't happen, that'll be another big hit on the local economy. You know, an Olympic trials is a $37 million economic impact generator. So those have big impacts. So, you know, we'll see what happens. And again, we just got to see these COVID cases keep going down so we can move out of this extreme category and really start helping our restaurants in particular.
It's going to be real interesting to see those numbers.
Mr. Irvin?
Yeah, I remember when you, well, actually, I forget the lady's name who was featured on the bicycle through the vineyard there, but I remember she gave this presentation at Land Economic Committee well before all the COVID happened. And one of the things in preparation for when it was Oregon 2021 was the idea about standing up tours, regional tours for that period. And I wonder if there's anything that we can be doing or thinking ahead to even promoting those opportunities for our local region, whether it be up into the mining area or just whatever the covered bridge kind of thing. Is that, yeah, how would you like to see that happen to really work in concert? Would that be through you guys, or would you be promoting if some entrepreneurs in town wanted to set something up? Would you work in hand and get and consult? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the more kind of opportunities people have to get out and explore the county, the better. You know, America's Hub World Tours, which is a step-on tour company, who started, you know, probably a year or so before COVID hit, and obviously is struggling during this time. Kind of offered some of those tours over the coast, winery tours, et cetera, that people could just, you know, go online, buy a ticket, and get picked up and go, versus, you know, getting a bunch of people together and renting your own vehicle. So the more opportunities for those things to be in place when people start arriving early and staying late, the better. So I think it can be a combination of our team working with the Chamber of Commerce and locals to come up with those ideas and help them come to fruition. We've got the time to plan that out, and we've got, or we did, you know, we'll hope, you know, they all make it. We have some really great providers that could help with that in terms of, I think, some of the actual vehicles and things like that. So with Oregon, you know, the delay and pushing it out a year, that does give us that opportunity to get those things in place. So, you know, an example of that is Johnny Helfrich and A Helfrich Outfitters. You know, they run rafting and fishing trips on the McKenzie. And, you know, we said, well, one of the things that would be really great with all these people in town would be, what about just a rafting trip that kind of came through town? It was really easily accessible. You know, you didn't have to drive for an hour to get on the raft and do all that. They could just boom, and we could just send them out, be short, you know, maybe 2-hour stints that just came through town. Wouldn't be the big whitewater, but we'd get people out on the river. And she's ready to kind of pull the trigger on that. So yeah, any ideas that folks have, we are more than willing to help facilitate that.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Hey, you're welcome. You guys have a good evening. Thank you for your service.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, item B, a fire and mayor contest. Mr. Myers.
So I don't believe we have a youth advisory council member on with us tonight. Is there one on? I don't think so. So we do have the If I Were Mayor contest, and the Youth Advisory Council has requested, and Youth Rep last council meeting, MJ Roddy, asked for the council to put this on and to consider supporting the If I Were Mayor contest this year. Specifically, there's a couple of Youth Advisory Council members that are interested in participating. And in the past, the council has done this and participated in the program. It's been a challenge over the years trying to get essays or videos or even posters that really reflect what a mayor really can do. I mean, the mayor can't turn the city into chocolate or deal with books, which might be a good idea, but we'll let the chamber do that with their golden foil chocolate tour right now. But you know, what can they really do? And I think the YAC has a better handle on that and is interested in doing that, and a couple of them are preparing and doing some work to do it. So the question is, does the council want to have an If I Were Mayor contest? We would emphasize it and specifically gear it towards the YAC, but any youth in the community could apply and still submit something. But what's your wish?
I would like to see it because these do get judged at the mayor's convention, and you see what wins, and they really put in some good effort, and I want to see. I know we have as good a kids, if not better, in our community than these ones that are winning. So I don't want to see Elgin keep winning it. I want to start taking it away. And so I'm all for it, and I will make myself available for any of the youth that need to talk about what would help, what we can and can't do. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How do we get this out to, with the schools closed, how do we get this program out to the youth of this community?
Well, what we would probably do is we would pass it to the YAC, and then we'd also pass it to some of the administrators to get to specific educators to send out in their digital platforms to kids, so that it could get out there and share that. We've also put it on our Facebook page, we put it on our web page. We put it out so that it's out there. We hopefully, because we'll be participating in it, we'll see some information in the news media on KNND and in the Sentinel as well, where we'll get a number of people that are interested there. The other thing that always does trigger a little more interest is a local prize. So that's something to consider. In the past, we've done prizes. Let's see, we've offered the 75 and 50 for the essay. We've offered 100 and then 50 for first and second in the media presentation. I think we've offered 50 and 25 for the posters, which is the elementary age. So that's a tool as well to encourage more participation. So.
And if I remember right, it is 500 from the state if they win the state.
They're saying you could win. Yeah.
Wow. Thank
so
you, Richard.
Our suggestion is, if you do want to do it, that we'd make it, we'd set a deadline sometime in early April so that you could judge the applications prior to the date when they have to get turned in, or mid-April, so they can get turned in time to be in the state contest by May 7th.
Mr. Stennett?
You kind of answered my question. I was going to ask about the timeline. We'll have some kids back in school with the hybrid model by the 8th too, so that should help get the word out.
Mr. Irvin?
Yeah, I'm in favor of having this. I don't mind it being targeted through the YAC. Certainly, as long as it does stay open to everybody. I can think of a couple of applicants. Although what might be helpful as well, if we're getting competitive in the state, would be to have a list or reference of prior year winners and even runner-ups, so that those could be studied and further our chances.
Ms. Soulsby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Irvin, I like the way you think, although I would support the Chocolate City. And I love this idea of getting our youth involved, and I would help any way I could as well.
Looks like we got to go.
Yeah.
Great. We will let them know, and we'll get it moving.
Okay, item C is discussion regarding providing utility service outside the city limits within the UGB. Mr. Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So currently, the city has several locations where clusters of properties are outside the city limits, but inside the urban growth boundary. Many of these areas have city utilities running by the unincorporated properties. Over the years, several unincorporated property owners have asked if they could connect to the city utilities. Currently, the owners are told they must annex into the city to receive city services. Most of the requests where the properties can be legally annexed into the city, the owner moves forward with the annexation. Occasionally, properties can't legally annex, therefore the request is denied. Recently, a request to connect to the city services was made where the property is outside the city limits, inside the UGB, and has a water line adjacent to the property, which serves homes on each side of the property. The property can't be annexed as it is not contiguous to the city limits. Staff asked legal counsel if there was a legal way for the property to connect to the city services without being annexed. Staff asked this question because all surrounding properties are receiving water service without being within the city limits. Cottage Grove Municipal Code, section 18.04.010 states, for an area of land outside the city limits to be provided water, sewer, or city sewer or water service, the parcel must first be incorporated into the city limits. Presently, no provision in the city code allows new extralateral connections. According to the city attorney, city code could provide direction allowing extralateral connections within the UGB under limited circumstances. The city's utility codes currently include continuing service for existing service connections in the UGB or beyond. Extension of the city utilities beyond the UGB are now prohibited except under specific conditions by state law. If the city council desires to proceed with allowing extralateral connections, legal counsel's strong recommendation is to amend the city code to provide a path to connect properties within the UGB but outside the city limits that meet specific requirements. The requirements could include a consent to annex, utility extension payments, adjacent to, they must be adjacent to utility service, potential non-remonstrance agreements, and a consent to lien for non-payment and other items. Frequently, the request to connect to the city utilities is due to on-site well or septic failures. These can become serious life safety and health issues for the property owner. If solutions are not found to provide water and or sewer, the property can become unusable and in some cases a nuisance to the neighborhood and the city. Allowing the utility connections keeps the property viable. So this is really an information only. If the council desires to consider this at a future date, then we would work with legal counsel to prepare an amendment to the municipal code for the council to consider.
Mr. Fleck?
Yeah, it's funny. When I first read this, as I mentioned Friday morning, I was absolutely opposed to this until I read the attorney's requirements. And so, you know, I could certainly support this. You know, I'm sure many situations where somebody is, you know, in an island, you know, cannot annex in, yet their, you know, well or their septic system are failing. You know, and or there's a groundwater issue in the area. And so I can see specific reasons that this would actually be good for the city. And I will mention, like Faye did Monday or Friday morning, sorry, that, you know, out of the city limits, they do pay, what is it, a time and a half or 2 times the rate, Faye?
Yeah, it's not quite double, but it's I think it's at least 1.5 times the rate.
Right. So my initial, you know, response was that these folks are not paying property taxes, which are significant. You know, we all, you know, are paying, you know, quite a bit to maintain these services. That being said, it's an enterprise fund which funds itself. So I guess I'm in support of this with these requirements. And I do think it should be specifically for, you know, failing septic, failing water system or groundwater. I mean, that seems like that would be the only reason somebody would want to switch. But I do think that, you know, there needs to be a reason for us to do it as well, if that makes sense.
Ms. Soulsby?
I do agree with Councilor Fleck, but I also would like us to keep an open mind and just take a look at what the city can bring back, just so that we know every avenue that this could be taken in. Thank you.
Mr. Stannett?
So Faye, the property you mentioned in your report that couldn't annex because it was not contiguous, its neighbors were getting city services. Was that a situation with well failure or a septic system failure. I guess I'm in a bigger way. I'm kind of wondering how hypothetical are these conditions? How common are these situations? Is it a pressing need to make a change?
So I would say probably in the 4 years that I've been here, this is probably the third request of its kind. One of the property owners was able to annex along 6th Street. She had a failing septic system. Another, actually two in this area that we're talking about that wanted to hook up to water services, but haven't been able to get the approval because they just aren't contiguous to the property, to city limits. So it's not really common, and the majority of the time there's some sort of a failure, either a water line or a sewer line. In this specific instance, it's water. It was along the main route that our water line went up to Lang Creek, and early on, when there was no restrictions, people got on the city water. The lots are small, and under today's building constraints, it's really difficult to put a well and a functioning septic on a parcel that's less than an acre. The county would prefer two. So, our postage stamp lots of 8,000 square feet, it's virtually impossible to rehab a failed septic and or punch in a new well and meet the 100 feet distance requirements between well and septic. So yeah, it's really pretty much tied. If you've got a house that's existed in the community and you've either got your own, I know there's people that have their own wells, they also have or they have their own septic system, but at some point when they fail, they most likely don't have a recourse to get it fixed.
Any more questions?
So I'm kind of sensing that we can at least draft potential code change and for the council to consider. Is that correct?
I think so.
Thank you.
All right. Report from the city manager. You're muted.
Just a few items, since this is quickly approaching one of our longest meetings ever. Number one, the first item is February 11th. This Thursday is a very special day. Does anybody know what Thursday is?
City's birthday.
It's the city's birthday, so February 11th, 1887. So be sure that you do a little celebration, make cake or something at home and celebrate the city's birthday from 1887. Just wanted to make sure people knew that. Coming up on March 8th, we have the potential to hear a presentation. We've been hitting a lot of presentations lately, but there is a development occurring at Metz Hill, south of Cottage Grove, about 25 miles on I-5. An organization has purchased 2,800 acres down there. Basically all of the Metz Hill exit to the west side of the freeway and up into the hills. There's actually an old airfield up there as well that they've included in this purchase. What they're planning to do, and they're going to be presenting their supposedly their planning commission application to the Douglas County Planning Commission on April 15th for a world-class international horse equestrian center there on that acreage. It will be their plan is a climate-controlled, full-size equestrian arena that will handle Olympic and world-class competitions for horses. This could have an impact on Cottage Grove with travelers coming in from all around the world into Eugene and coming through Cottage Grove to go to events and activities there and be wanting to stay. And so we have the opportunity for them to come and give a little presentation about their event. And so I just wanted to find out if the council's really interested in hearing about it, and learn a little bit more about, some of them have a colorful past, but you know, they're very transparent about some of that, and but they have this vision and dream, and looks like they're making it happen. Whether it will be over the course of a number of years or what, but it's something that we may want to be at least a little bit interested in and be aware of it. So if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and schedule it. If everybody's okay, we'll schedule that for the 8th. For a little brief presentation on that. We got a request today from Lane County. They are applying for a safety corridor pilot program for London Road. So out South 6th Street, and basically crossing the freeway, and where the Lang Road, where the Weyerhaeuser Hall Road and other things come in right there. What is that? Is that Lang Road that comes in right there?
Latham Road.
Latham Road comes in there on out to the lake and around up on the one side of the lake a ways, a safety corridor. Basically what that does is it establishes some extra safety precautions and some awareness there, and some possibly even some improvements along the road to enhance and can improve safety. They've had a number of deaths and injury accidents along that road. There's some bad stretches where there's been a number of incidents that have occurred, and they're asking for our support. If there's no objections, I will go ahead and prepare a letter and send it off saying that on behalf of city, as the city manager, yes, we're in support of the application and improving safety on that stretch of London Road. They didn't, I mean, if we'd had this a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we could have brought it to the council, and you guys could have done a letter of support to it specifically, but we'll do another letter that's not as powerful, but do that. If there's any concerns, let me know. Doesn't look like it. Councilor Irvin?
Do we have any other examples of safety corridors nearby that we can see? I mean, they're basically pulling down the speed limits, or I hope they're catching those people that try to run you off the road drunk. As part of that.
Yeah, and they enhance some of that. I was involved in the safety corridor many years ago in Myrtle Point when we did Highway 42 and 38. We did both of those highways because they kind of link together. And it involves a number of, it draws attention to some of it, so you can get some other funding, make some of those improvements. You also then have some signage to warn people, hey, this is a safety corridor, be cautious. Can do some things on speed limits, encouraging people to have their headlights on. Those kind of things all happen as a part of the safety corridor. Yeah. It has proven successful and good at reducing accidents or occurrences on those areas where they do this. And so they apply and move these around the state, and that's kind of what this is. So if that's okay.
Mr. Roberts had a question.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would that include bike lanes along there? Is that kind of stuff?
If there is an issue associated with that as a danger, it could, but that's not really the point here on this. It may if there was improvements. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The last item I have is, well, two more items because I want to get back to the applications as well. Tomorrow there's a hearing for House Bill 2344, I believe it is. It's the Don't Flush Them bill to prevent, to make those people that provide and sell wipes that they can't say flushable on them, and that they should say non-flushable. So we'll be submitting a document for testimony in that with pictures, and we're really sad that we can't make them scratch and sniff pictures, but we will be sending them pictures to include in the testimony on that bill so that we can try to get that legislation passed. The bill looks very promising. It is supported by the industry as well as the League of Oregon Cities and a number of other parties involved as well to get that bill moving through. It has been a collaborative effort with the League and the industry folks working together at crafting the bill before the legislature came into session. So that's an example of how legislation should really be done, where you bring the parties together and try to solve the problems. And so I think it's going to move forward, but we do want to we have some very recent examples of how this can impact wastewater treatment systems, and we want to get that into the record. So we'll be submitting that tomorrow. For your information on the assistant to the city manager position, I reported 23 this morning, but I hadn't gotten all the printed out ones from our human resources person, and we have 27 applications. One of those applications came in at 8:32 on Friday, so essentially they don't get any points for timeliness, and so they'll fall out and getting it on time. But so we have 26 applications that we'll be going through and screening, and hopefully by the end of this week we will have a supplemental questionnaire or homework assignment out to a smaller group, hopefully 6 or so, that we can get them to respond and give us some more examples of their abilities in this new virtual world. And then following probably the last week, full week of February, we'll be doing some virtual interviews and exercises and things as well with a few less candidates. So we'll try to narrow it down. Hopefully we'll be down to somewhere on that first week, full week of March, that we'll be able to make an offer and a final interview and then an offer. So we'll see. That's my report.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's it. I got it.
Got it. Okay, and there's no attorney, there's no items removed, we're adjourned.
So has this been one of the longest meetings? Seems like
No, I remember one that went till 11:45 in executive session. Do you remember that one, Richard?
I think so. Yeah, that was a while ago, though.
Was that Walmart? Was that back when we had Walmart?
I don't remember, but yes, I was dragging. It was a long day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 4:30 is going to come right early.
Good night.
Night all.